Welcome to Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a
What's
light
your
on
story?
incredible. What does accessibility mean to you?
What's your mission? Welcome all to accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a light on incredible individuals and organizations and the work that they do. I'm your host, Josh Basil. I'm a C4-5 quadriplegic, paralyzed below my shoulders, and a power wheelchair user. I'm the Community Relations Manager at accessiBe and a passionate disability rights advocate and trial attorney focused on breaking down barriers to access and inclusion for people with disabilities. Today on accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions, we're joined by Christine Hemphill, the founder and managing director of Open Inclusion. Welcome, Christine.
Hey, Josh. Lovely to be here, and thank you for the invite.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to have you as our guest today. And just let's jump right into it. Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Well, as you mentioned, I'm the founder and managing director of Open, and I really founded it with a very singular purpose that still drives every single thing we do today, which is to bring the perspectives of disabled and older individuals into design and innovation. And actually, probably what drives me more than anything is I was a designer and innovator for a number of decades before I got into being an inclusive researcher, designer and innovator. And turning up with intent is not enough. That intent needs to be informed by different people's perspectives. And actually current design practices and current innovation doesn't stop often enough and deeply enough to understand how much humans differ. So when they're thinking about designing for humans, they're not really thinking about the breadth of human experience, and therefore design is actually quite significantly under-delivering to the community today. And what I saw was it was insight, it was understanding. It's not necessarily intent. I think a lot of people get up wanting to design something lovely that lots of people will enjoy and appreciate, but they don't have that fuel of insight from people with different lived experiences of disability, with different functional needs, different adaptive approaches, different identities that can really inform a much better product, or particularly in innovation, a future product set that's going to be even more useful to more people.
So often businesses want to explore more about disability and what those data points are, or how to be more inclusive, or more welcoming. Like, can you kind of walk us through a little bit, it's so much, I always talk with companies, it's like, you gotta make the move, you gotta take the next step, take the leap and do something. So when it comes to the research, tell us more about how open inclusion helps businesses.
Very simply, it's needing to know how to ask. So, firstly, having the interest, the intent, the awareness that maybe the data set, the insights, whether they're qualitative or quantitative, that are fueling your work today might be insufficient. So starting point is just recognizing what are the gaps? Who aren't you listening to? Are you commissioning market research that's from an organization that's using inaccessible approaches in order to reach those participants and that feedback? Are you reaching to qualitative insights that are coming through formats that are not specifically looking at different access needs? And in fact, if not specifically designed in, you're probably designing out a lot of insights that if instead of kind of going, we've just got this center and it's, we'll get to those groups at some point. If you flip that and do it in the inverse and start at the edges, you'll find there's so much power there because they're the underheard voices and therefore the under-designed for access needs and considerations that actually are far more creative and can drive a product, further forward a lot faster for the same amount of insight. So you're really qualitative first, just starting and going, who might we engage with to understand what our customer experience is like today? Pick a couple of key journeys as an organization and say, let's engage with some disabled, some older, some individuals, some people with different access needs and different approaches to understand what our experience is like for them. Where are the friction? Where are the barriers? How might we really understand it on a journey basis? As opposed to using a standards basis, which a standard by its very nature has to be usable in any industry, in any organization, pretty well anywhere in the world, depending on the standards you're talking about. So journey-based, who's excluded, in what way, where are the delightful bits of your organisation to protect and to really amplify as well. So not just catching things going wrong, catching things going right, and then extending the use of that.
I know you've been doing this now, and when it comes to like different things you've learned or memorable stories, can you share with me some of those that have had a lasting impact on you?
I think what's most interesting, loads of memorable stories, but when people engage with people with disabilities in insight, it's just amazing. You'll have people who for 15 years have been a product designer of a really specific product set. They know everything about that product. That could be a digital product, a physical product. I'm thinking about a soap product we were working on last year. We had people that for 15 years, literally, that's all they thought about was making that product better. And we were exposing some diary studies we had done for them, sharing people's insights on using that product with different access needs. And you just saw their eyes widen and they just went, oh my gosh, I had never thought anyone would use our product like that. It wasn't designed for it. That's why it's failing. And it's that, who would have thought? And so it's that ability to let people see their own products, services, or environments almost fresh again through the perspectives of different people with different experiences to their own. That's the real joy of research, being able to give that to whether it's the product designer, whether it's a category manager, an insight, someone who's responsible for bringing insights, but being able to really let them see their own experiences in a much more inclusive way, really, in a way that they might only hear today at the very extreme when it hits a complaint, or at the very extreme when someone's done something extraordinary and it's hit, a claim for someone who's really gone out of their way to include a customer with an additional need.
And so often it's doing it right from the beginning makes that path forward so much easier for businesses to create better products, for more abilities, or even at the end of the day, making it so that you don't have to spend all the time at the end to try to fix everything to include more communities. And I mentioned this before we started talking today, it's too often disability communities have been an afterthought. But if we do it right from the beginning, or at least do it right now, the future becomes that much easier.
And I think it's that ease, but there's also just a practicality of what can you feed in now and then therefore improve with a much greater trajectory than once something's built. Much lower cost, much more creativity from the start because you've got that insight. But equally, organisations have contexts and products and services that are out there in the environment today. So what can you do to improve and progress those that are already there to ensure that you kind of put a platform under the experience and ensure you're not providing customer experiences today that are not brand accredited, that you wouldn't be proud to be providing? And how can you work with what you've got with progress rather than perfection, while also creating the next generation of products, services and environments that are going to be much more inclusive because you had that insight up front?
Absolutely. I love asking this next question, but what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the word accessibility?
It's a little bit negative. It's access. It's the reason we're open inclusion, not open accessibility. Access is great. Access is important. Access is required. But access is insufficient. Access talks about I can get in, I can get there, and I can access it. But it doesn't talk about experience in the same way. And actually, I think of what we do at Open is really informing better inclusive customer experience. And experience is about delight, joy, value, in addition to just getting access, actually getting experience. And designing for experience is a slightly higher bar. And I think it's also because accessibility is so tied to standards and requirements and laws and the safety net that is so important in society. But it's a safety net. We don't come in to look at the safety net. We come in to have an experience. So to me, accessibility is incredibly important, but it's an underpinning of, essentially a safety net around design, whereas disability inclusive design and experience, to me, is ensuring that you're providing not the same experience to everyone, but the same not the same journey for everyone, but the same experience for everyone, so that you don't have this very mismatched customer experience you provide to individuals depending on their needs.
When it comes to research around disability, what can that teach the world, teach the business world about people with disabilities?
I'd actually take a step back and say, what can it teach people about humans? Because humans differ. And humans differ so much more than we like to show. And we differ, and sometimes we differ in identity, and we might identify as disabled or not. People with the same functional needs sometimes will and sometimes won't identify as disabled as well. But those differences can disable us significantly depending on how design steps up for that. Apologies, that's my dog chatting in the background. But the difference with humans is we try, a lot of disability is non-visible. Some disability is visible, and some is visible some of the time. In fact, I've got a colleague that you know very well who she was joking that, for the first time in her working life, she can have a non-visible disability because she can choose how she's seen in a screen when so much work is done online. And actually, we can choose so much more now when we own the identity and how we wish to own different identities. But actually our diversity in how we move, we sense, we think, and we feel, depending on how well things are designed, can be very disabling or very enabling. Now, the wonderful thing about that is that makes that line very mobile, because we can just design better and we can move that line of disability significantly, and we can design for more humans.
I like that. And so, all right, as humans, what do you think we can do to make the world a more inclusive place? What's one little thing we can do all as humans?
I think the most important thing is think about, I sometimes joke about swim to success, and swim is an acronym for someone who isn't me. So think about what your known knowns are. What's the experience that you do understand and you know? But equally think really deeply about what's the experience you don't know? What's the experience you don't understand? Who has those perspectives that you can't reach to through your own personal experience or the experience within your team? So to think about how might you reach to that experience to inform a better product, service or design, and that reaching out beyond current practices. There's so much that is flawed in our current standard practices. Just picking up on what was before and making a new one like that is going to fail a lot of people. So getting creative, thinking about how might you get that perspective in, start at the edges, start with people with really deep lived permanent experience that regularly disables them in different environments, and think about how can I solve for that. And you're going to solve for a whole swathe of people with different access needs, whether they're permanent, temporary or situational, that currently your product might be failing. So
I love that. Learning from others' experiences, learning from others' perspectives of all communities. There's so much value that can be brought to the table with that. And
Absolutely.
when it comes to the current kind of the biggest gaps with businesses prioritizing access and inclusion, what are those biggest gaps?
I think asking early enough and understanding deeply enough, to summarize it. So you were talking before about if only they could, you could get in a little bit earlier. There's so much more flexibility when you've got that insight in early. There's so much, before the cement's kind of got dry and it's hard to change things, and that's not just about a built environment. It's hard to change a digital design once it's been kind of fully wireframed. You've got the navigation set, things are already in motion, let alone live. So in any environment, getting in early enough to really be creative about and constructive about designing in for different needs, being adaptive, not trying to have one size that would fit all, that, that's really not. So thinking about how can a product be more adaptive to different needs, and that could be different characteristics of a human, but also humans in different contexts. People who are on the move, people who are in a dark space or a bright space, or who have very limited funds at the time. So the different contexts of use. And then getting in deeply enough, so actually understanding, not at a very light level, but actually drilling in deeply enough to really understand how to inform better design. In fact, we often talk about for innovation. At the start of innovation, it's quite useful to have market research, asking a lot of people small numbers of things. But once you're in co-design and co-innovation, it's really helpful to have a small number of people you can work very deeply with. But then to get things back out to market again, you want to go back towards market research rather than design research approaches. So again, going to lots of people, lighter research. So it's really thinking about right size for the approach, for the time that you're in, using the right research methodology. And it's not trying to do everything all the time. It's getting just enough to really inform that decision that's going to be a much more valuable decision long term.
Christine, thank you so much for being our guest today on accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. I really enjoyed our conversations.
Absolute pleasure, Josh. Thank you for some great questions.
And to all of our guests, thank you so much for being with us to the end of accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions. And until next time, remember to hit that subscribe button and to follow us at accessiBe_community. And as always, thank you so much for being on this journey with us. Take care, everyone.